What is happening, party people in the house? Raise the roof. Let me tell you something. This is going to be different than a lot of them that we do. Why? 4 weeks. I'm talking 4 weeks from today is the election. That's what we're talking about. So we want to give you 4 weeks to figure out, hey, what's going on in the election. And when mortgage only, this is the topic, mortgage, real estate. We're not getting into any of the other issues. We'll talk about that in a second. But when I said, who knows about this election? There's a guy, and his name is Rich Swerbinsky. The guy knows everything about everything. He's got his finger on the pulse. Most of you probably already know him. He's got Upward and Onward Consulting. He's a really smart guy, and we have to listen to what he has to say. And then he found out that he roots for the Cleveland Browns. So I'm like, he's not that smart. I don't know why we have to listen to what he has to say, because if you have faith in them, you don't have faith in much. Rich, how you doing, baby?
Doing great. Thank you for the very kind intro. And yeah, Browns fans just gluttons for punishment. So
it's a tough year for you all. I will say this. I'm looking at my clock over here behind. I don't know why. It just stopped. So usually it gives us what our 15 minutes is. I have a backup for it. It just stopped ticking. I have no idea. Maybe it's something with the weather. We are going to talk about what's going on with the election, but because of that, I know that one side hates the other side and the other side hates the other side, and there's always fights. So I just want to give you a couple ground rules here today. Of course, you can always put whatever you want in the comment section. We got no problem with that, but let me just say this. Number one, we're not talking opinions here. This is what is on their website. This is what they've said. This is going to be very fact oriented and not projecting out of what we think. It's like they have proposed X or they have proposed Y. I'm not saying I like this one. I'm not saying that one's not going to work. I'm not going to say one party's better than the other party. We're going to be really, really neutral. This is what's been said, and this should be the start of your information gathering, okay? Because we got 4 weeks ahead. Things can change. I will say we are talking mortgage and real estate. When it comes to an election, I don't think that anybody should be it's not just what they're going to do with mortgages. We have all kinds of other things that you want to think about, but all we're going to do is talk about mortgages. And I will say this. I don't care if you like the Republicans. I don't care if you like the Democrats or if you dislike either of them. Both of them have said that mortgages and housing and real estate are important in our country. Both of them have plans to try and help them grow. Their plans are very different. I'm not saying one's better or the other. My humble opinion is, boy, let's implement what both of them have to say, and maybe it'll work that much better for both of them. Last thing I'm going to say right here to show neutrality is we are going to put Harris first, as you can see, top of the page, and Trump at the bottom of the page. Why? Alphabetical, H before T. That's all we're talking about. I don't want to hear about it. We're all good, but and there is a difference between the two. So let's start real quick. Rich, you already said hello. I want them to hear your genius and how smart you are. Tell us what the Harris plan is when it comes to housing.
Well, I think the Harris plan, she's spoken about it far more than Trump, and with some pretty specific things. The $25,000 home buyer tax credit you see up on the screen right now. This has been the biggest headline proposal of anything Harris has put out there. Just you have a housing starved America right now with just inventory and affordability so challenged. So proposing giving people $25,000 to put down towards
only for first-time home buyers, though, is that correct?
First-time home buyers, yeah. So, and it's polled really well with the American public. Now, with economists, on the other hand, hasn't fared quite as well. So we saw a little shift in the wording of this policy. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, they changed the wording on VP Harris's, their official policy statement on her campaign website, where they add the words as more homes are built and as more affordable housing supply is created, then we'll implement this first-time home buyer tax credit. So this is nothing that you'll see right out of the gate. This would have to pass Congress. There's 0% chance of this passing Congress right now, regardless of the makeup of it, just because of the fear of economists and politicians that this would drive home prices up even further.
And seller credit, is that coming from sort of a leftover for where Biden was?
Yeah, well, so I mean, about 7 or 8 months ago, the Biden admin put a bunch of stuff out there on housing policy, including a version of this first-time homebuyer tax credit. But they also mentioned the desire to implement a seller credit. This would only be to sellers that sell homes at or below area and median values to first-time home buyers. So this is nothing that the Harris campaign has proposed independently. But it is something that the Biden Harris campaign put out there 7 or 8 months ago. So it's something that is worth noting.
So as a quickie, when I look at what Harris is trying to do, Harris is trying to look at on an individual basis, how can I help this individual get into a home? And is that good? Yes. Is it bad? Yes. Well, your decision. So she's looking at the individual. Let's talk about what Trump, because Trump's looking at it in a little bit more, not as the individual, but fiscally overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not surprisingly, Republicans less likely to lean on Congress and policy and bills to serve their agendas, especially President Trump. He's one that's really worked, former President Trump, with the private sector on things. When you hear the former president speak about housing, the message that the drum he's banging more than any is like, listen, we're gonna fix immigration and we're gonna fix inflation. And if we fix those two things, rates are going to be lower. There's going to be more inventory. You're going to have a much healthier housing market. So those are the things that he continues to lean on more than specific policy proposals. So President Trump, former President Trump did have a very good relationship in his first term with the National Association of Home Builders. You would suspect that if reelected, he would work with the home builders, probably in the private sector, and then through Congress to relax regulation to help the home builders out. So, but yeah, it's going to be a much more, kind of lean on the private market strategy as opposed to what Harris has proposed.
She's going 1-1-1. He's saying high tide rises all boats, right? I mean, that's what we're looking at there.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, but the CFPB, we know that, and we've seen it in the past because Trump was president, and we know what the CFPB did under Trump and Harris as part of the Biden administration. We see what what are you looking CFPB wise?
Well, it's another good example of just how much is at stake for housing in this election. Never has housing been talked about more leading into an election. And you're just going to have, very, very stark contrasts on a number of items, including the CFPB. The current CFPB director, Rohit Chopra, it was Senator Elizabeth Warren's parting gift for kind of dropping out of the race 4 years ago and clearing the aisle for Biden to be the candidate. That was kind of what she wanted. And he's a very, very aggressive director of the CFPB. He came from the FTC, also very aggressive department under the Biden administration. So, if VP Harris is elected, you're going to see Director Chopra is going to stay in place. They have issued a number of different consent orders on companies just over the course of the last 6 months, a bunch. It would be an emboldened, entrenched CFPB, really would be focused on consumer protection, continuing to penalize bad actors, keeping people out of foreclosure. One thing they have talked about, the current edition of the CFPB, is a streamlined refinance program of some sort. It's the one kind of offensive side of the ball initiative that the CFPB has been speaking about a lot lately. And, some way to make refis cheaper and easier for American homeowners. So that's something you could see that's a positive, but it would be it would be probably the most strict regulatory environment for mortgage lenders if you fast forward a couple of years, if Harris is elected, just because you're going to have a CFPB that's really aggressive, really smart, and has been entrenched for a while. On the flip side, if President Trump is reelected, let's just look at what he did in his first term. He appointed Mick Mulvaney, who called the CFPB a sick, sad joke. Not long before he was appointed as the CFPB director. So, the Bureau would continue to exist, but it would be populated with very different types of people and just have very different outcomes. So
go versus slow. I mean, that's sort of what it looks like right there when we look at the two of them. we're talking about new homes, and both of them have thrown in some, hey, proposals. Let's get more stuff being built. We talked about building already a little bit. Go a little bit deeper into that, please.
Yeah, this has been the thing that VP Harris has been talking about more than anything on the stump as of late. And that is, her desire and plan to build 3 million more homes. There hasn't been tons of detail kind of laid out around it. She's saying she would, eliminate the red tape and, tax incentives for builders who build homes that are sold to first-time home buyers. So, the home builders themselves, you would think they'd be elated by that, but they put out their own statements, really kind of speaking to like, listen, hey, it's $93,000 per house on average before we put a shovel in the ground until we really get rid of, the unnecessary regulatory fees. It's going to be tough to make any kind of momentum. But, a VP Harris certainly pitching a populist kind of campaign tone right now. And, it's another issue that's really popular with the voters is just constructing new homes because of all the aforementioned inventory and affordability issues, that go along with housing right now. So former President Trump has also spoken about the issue, not nearly as much. He's talked about repurposing federal lands to build more homes on. I think we'll get to that in a little bit. But he's really talked about the regulatory piece of it for the builders. And you could be certain that is one of the things that if the former president is reelected, that he would take on, in the first few months he takes office is, I think doing what he can to, help lower the regulatory costs and burden for the home builders.
Yeah, National Association of Home Builders says 24% of all expenses of purchasing a home go towards government regulation and compliance. Freddie and Fannie, what's going to happen to them? I think that's it's almost a self-explaining slide right there, right?
This is a big one. I mean, of all the issues that we're talking about here, this is the one that has the biggest potential to just impact our daily lives as professionals in the mortgage industry. If VP Harris is elected, I think you would certainly see, the GSEs just to continue to exist as they are now. I think the change there is they'd be used probably more aggressively to help pursue some of the other parts of VP Harris's housing policies. Fannie and Freddie have, pontificated over the years. Do we get into the construction financing space, to make it, cheaper and more readily available? Right now, it's tough to do construction lending if you're not a depository. So you could see that from Fannie and Freddie. Certainly, their goals for first-time home buyers to put more first-time home buyers in the homes. The GSEs certainly could be used as a utility to help kind of meet that initiative. On the flip side, former President Trump, in his first term, he was getting close at the end of his first term to, really starting to move the ball forward on privatizing the GSEs, taking them out of conservatorship. His former FHFA director, Mark Calabria, this has been just a passion project of his forever. We're actually having him on another show I host called The Big Picture. He's our guest a week from Thursday. So really excited to talk to him, but he's made some public comments as of late. And what he said, I think, is pretty much spot on. He said, listen, I did a lot of the work to, privatize the GSEs. If the former president is reelected, there's a 0% chance it'll happen in 2025. But he pegged a 70% chance of them being privatized by 2027, just kind of, speaking to, it's a huge process. It can be done without Congress, but far more difficult.
This stuff takes time.
The makeup of the House and the Senate is going to be huge on this one. If the Republicans control both, you could see this as something that, former President Trump, may try to, prioritize a little bit in 26, potentially 25 and 26. But it's going to take a while. But just, really stands to have pretty drastic, if the GSEs were taken out of conservatorship and privatized, it would, it sounds easy, right? Like, oh yeah, we don't want them under the, well, the flip side of that is it would raise mortgage rates and costs because right now the government explicitly guarantees payment on their bonds that they're selling into the market, which, if it wasn't for that, these, 6.5% mortgage rates that we have today would be like 8%, honestly. So,
Folks, I know we say we do this in 15 minutes. We're going to go just a minute or two over today. I do apologize for that, but we have a lot to talk about. What about institutional buyers instead of the individual homeowner? What about institutional buyers?
yeah, it's Harris. One of the things that she said is within her first few days in office that she would call on Congress to pass the Stop Predatory Investing Act. It's a bill that's been out there, introduced by Sherrod Brown, since 2023, that really removes tax incentives for institutional buyers of homes. This is something I think for sure that she would try to pursue. It would have to go through Congress. So again, the makeup of the Congress is going to be big there. Trump has really not spoken on this issue at all, but his running mate, J.D. Vance, this is actually kind of a passion issue for him. He's spoken about the negative impacts of institutional investors. Didn't really speak about it at all in the VP debate, but this could be an olive branch issue if Trump is reelected, something that they may, work with the left on or give to the left.
They're on the same side on an issue, actually.
Maybe. I mean, Trump hasn't really spoken on it, but this is a issue that makes a lot of sense to most Americans to, reduce the amount of investor buying of single family homes in America.
Just moving the next, repurpose federal lands for new housing. Just looking at the time, both are in favor of it, correct?
Both in favor. Yeah. I mean, they'd probably do it a little bit differently, but it's something both campaigns have spoken about.
And this is the one that I love. Oh, the next one's, I love this one also, but hit the affordable housing real quick. And then you're going to give me the predictions of who's going to be filling which positions. Go.
Yeah, rezoning is a huge thing. Just you're solving the affordable housing issue in America, because it has to really start with local municipalities rezoning. VP Harris has said she wants to create a $40 billion innovation fund that would really just incent local municipalities to rezone to allow for the construction of more affordable housing. On the flip side, former President Trump, his first term, he did, as part of one of his tax bills, included this initiative called Opportunity Zones, which provided tax incentives for developers, developing in kind of low income areas. So, I think this is, again, regardless who wins, you'll see one of these two kind of come to fruition just because of the importance of zoning locally.
And then we have, and this is just off of the top of Rich's head. We don't know anything. There's no definition of it, but if Harris wins, this is who he thinks are going to come in. Rich, pick one of these that's going to make the difference and that you're paying closest attention to.
Well, for me, I mean, the most impact, I think is the Fed chair, honestly, just because of their importance on fiscal policy and rates. Jerome Powell, he may step down. That's got to be a brutal, thankless job. Who knows? He's been in the role for a while. He's actually appointed by Trump. But I think that's the one that has the most ability to move the needle. If it's not Chopra at CFPB, it's going to be somebody that's ideologically just like him, so, and the same is true, quite frankly, with a lot of the other incumbents. But I can see all the incumbents like being offered, at least in the first year, because housing, if you change these heads out, you lose momentum, and we need momentum. The current Democratic lineup, it's a pretty seasoned, well-regarded group. So I could see all the incumbents at least being offered the ability to stay in place, at least out of the gates, if Harris wins.
And then if Trump wins,
much more
you're saying is the big name there.
I would say, HUD would be the big one with Trump. Ben Carson filled that role for Trump during his first term. They slashed the HUD budget. I mean, it was one of the first things Trump did, was just pretty drastically reduced HUD's budget. So that would have big impact on our industry. And, just the types of programs and initiatives and things that you would see out of HUD. So, and you see on this list, it's a lot of, former appointees. Treasury Secretary is one to keep an eye on. It could be Doug Burgum, who the governor of North Dakota was running against Trump. It could even be Tim Scott, honestly, is qualified to do that. So, but they're going to be people, are very loyal to Trump. And this list is mostly people that have worked for him in the past in housing related functions.
Folks, my name's Steve Richmond. That's Rich Swerbinsky from a wonderful perspective. I thank you so much. Follow us on Facebook, follow either of us on LinkedIn, reach out to us. Rich, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Have a great day, y'all. Bye-bye.